All right, everybody, we are live.
Hey.
I noticed that a few people actually a lot of replays. We had a lot of replays the last time, or I won't say a lot, but we had some nice amount of replays the last time, and so we know that some people are going to watch us live. Some people are going to watch this on the replay. So we would love for you, whether you're live or you're watching the replay. We would love for you to comment. If you're watching the replay, you want them to
Type the word replay in the comments to let us know you're watching it on replay. That helps us know that, hey, folks are finding this valuable. They're going back in and watching it. And we had, a few people do that last time. Well, more than the last live that we did. So it's getting a little bit of traction.
Yep, that's
and
right.
We appreciate that.
Yes. So we want to welcome everyone to our Marriage Mondays for Living Well Today Marriage Ministry. I am Kendra Tillman.
I am Daniel Tillman.
It's your turn. It's your turn. Wave, man. I'm Angela Bullock. Yeah.
Wrong way. Catch the wave.
And so for people that this may be your first time watching us, so Living Well Today, so much of the work that we do actually is not what you see on Facebook or Instagram or even at our events, but we host marriage small groups. That's like at the core of the work that we do in marriage ministry, just helping couples have community around their marriage. So we started doing these Marriage Mondays a few weeks ago so that we can kind of talk about some of the topics that we know are common that are coming up in marriages. And so the four of us coming together to have these conversations with all of you. And so we hope that when you do watch this, that you will chime in, especially since we're talking about a topic that we know that everybody likes to talk about.
Yeah. And I forgot to pull out my dad joke notebook, so I don't have one for this one. But next time we're gonna have to have us a dad joke, Dennis, to kick it all off.
I can see his head swirling already. He's trying to think of one.
I already got one.
Oh,
we got a dad joke.
Oh,
Let's go.
Lord. Oh, Lord. Help us, Jesus.
A dad joke?
No, it's not a dad joke.
It's not a dad joke.
Talk about what we're going to be talking about tonight. It makes you want to say, oh, yeah.
All right now. So while
I'm just sharing, I'm just making sure I share it. So wherever you are, we would love drop in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. I see that we do have somebody joining us, so share with us in the comments where you're from, and so we know who is listening right now. And I just shared this on my wall. So if you are on Facebook, please share this out with the people that are on your timeline, because this might be a blessing to them. So tonight we're talking about, are you ready to dive deeper into true intimacy? So we're going to be talking about what true intimacy is. So now when I said that, a lot of the work that we do is with married couples through small groups. In our small groups right now, we're going through a series called The Art of Marriage. And in that series, there was a session that we got to be a part of this past Friday,
right?
And we were taught, and it was about sex.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we learned the Hebrew word for when the Bible says to know someone, right? So that has multiple meanings.
Okay.
But the meaning that we're talking about tonight is in the sexual, to know them sexually, intimately, right? And so the Hebrew that intimate love is yada.
Yada. Sounds like a French perfume to me. Yada.
Hey, it could be a little perfume. If that's what you need it to be.
There's gonna be a lot of people's code word when they text, hey, I'm down for some yada.
Yada me, baby.
What? Do I know you? Yes. Yes, I do know you.
I yada you too.
So
Yada. Sorry. I just couldn't let it go.
Okay. So let's start by talking about what did you expect from sex in marriage? So when you got married, what were your expectations for sex in marriage? Because this is Love for Real, right? Love for Real Marriage Monday. So that's what we talk about, where expectation meets reality. So what kind of expectation did you guys go into marriage with where sex is concerned?
I'm gonna let him start because I'll just say I think I didn't really fully think about the expectations fully. I think I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna get married, we'll have sex, and I it's all good. And then he can say how he felt, because it definitely, it was love, like reality meets.
Well, I mean, you think about expectation. It was. I think I was a little more immature back then, so it was more physical. It was physical. The physical actions from for intimacy. I mean, even intimacy was in my head thinking the physical aspect, and so the aspect of yada.
Yeah.
And
y'all with this yada.
Yeah. And so I think that's what I carried in with it. I didn't really think about all the other things that go into intimacy. I thought about just the physical aspect. And then I think when conflict arises, then it forces you to look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah. And I think for me, I just was like, oh, okay, I can legally have sex now. It's not a sin anymore. And that's all the thought I really put into it. Like, yay, I saved myself till I got married. Let's do it. But I didn't really think about all the other things that were going to go into it.
So I'll put the search for cultural expectations of marriage on the interwebs. And because I wanted to see if what the cultural expectations were lined up with what I was thinking back then. And I think pretty much they did. So number one was sex is always passionate and exciting. And that is something that you think when you're young, is what I thought. Hey, and that's what movies and TV and books, that's what they tell you, right? They don't show you the part of it where you don't perform, or you're not quite satisfied with it. So and like you said, Dennis, is physically
what did you expect?
That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
these were the things that when I think about that's what I was expecting.
You was
passion, excitement all the time.
And right? Where did you learn that from?
From watching TV, movies. Yeah, because in my house it wasn't talked about, right?
Yeah.
And so, whenever it was done behind closed doors. So I didn't know anything was going on, or what was happening. And physical pleasure is what I was looking for, right? You don't think I guess when you first get married, you don't connect sex with the brain, or the emotional connection.
Yes.
And you kind of learn that as you get into it. Oh, she needs to care about this. So yeah.
Well, I really expected it, like you said, to be passionate. I knew it wasn't gonna be every day.
Why not? How did you know that?
I just knew. I mean, well, when I got married, I was not a virgin. Daniel was not a virgin. But we had not had sex with each other when we got married, right? So I knew that we were very ready. We was burning, as the Bible would say. It's better to marry than to burn. So them drawers was on fire. So we were ready to go. We was ready to go. And so I just knew that I was looking forward to it. But I'm trying to think what other expectations that I have about sex once we got married. I think I expected it to be enjoyable all the time. I thought it was going to be like, there would be no awkwardness to it. That it's like, I think we talked about this either in our marriage group, or they talked about this in the video. I don't know about y'all, but like whenever you watch people having sex on TV, it's seamless, right? It's like clothes come off, everything, like everything connects right away with no kind of effort.
Right in place. That was another expectation.
Yeah.
It was going to be effortless.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out day one that was right.
Yeah.
Right? Because after you haven't had sex for a long time,
yes,
then things kind of revert back to where they're supposed to be.
That's the best way to say it, man. Good job. Good job.
And then
that's right, born again virgin.
When you go in and you're like, whoa,
yeah,
it hurt a little bit.
Yeah,
even for
both people,
for the man.
For both people, yeah.
And you're like, whoa, it ain't supposed to hurt. It's supposed to feel good.
Yes.
I would definitely say a bath was needed afterwards because I was like, oh, okay, I'm a born again virgin for real, like you said. Like, okay. And I think even like when I watch movies, I always say that Disney and Tyler Perry movies and different things like that, they just have kind of messed up the expectation because it's not real life, right?
Right.
Like you're gonna be asleep and some dude's just gonna come and kiss you and just make everything better, right? Like
yes.
Or Tyler Perry, I always say it's a man with a bad wig come and show up. And he's gonna take you and all your dead and all your baby daddy issues, and he's just gonna solve every problem. But I think when it comes to sex too, I even feel like when you show they show virgin sex in movies, I was like, it's never real. It's still this passionate, seamless thing.
Yeah,
like that junk hurt, Yeah,
and even let's we gonna go there. We're gonna go all the way there. The big O, right? Orgasm, right? Mm-hmm. Even in movies, TV show, whatever. When you're a virgin, you are having an orgasm the first time you have sex. I can tell y'all that was not my experience as a woman. Now for the men, maybe, but that was not my experience.
Don't take that much for us,
I don't remember whether or not I did or not. I do remember the pain. I remember the pain because the hymen was tight. It hurt.
Well, I don't know if that was because of a hymen.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, it was.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I believe it.
I don't know exactly. So this is a conversation that me and Daniel had. That so interestingly enough, there's this book that I've been reading. Because the longer we've been married and there's more freedom that comes, when you trust a person more as you age, all those things, right? And so I've been reading this book and it's been so interesting hearing them talking about the science of, sex, knowing your body parts and all that stuff. And I will say early on in our marriage, I just think it was God. Daniel was very intuitive about, okay, so we're having these challenges. Let's go back to the basics. Let's learn, let me learn these different parts of her body. Let her know, what's happening. Because, I think, just learning the different parts of our body parts. That was one of the first things he did so that we can understand, okay, how do we make this connection? How do we know what the other person wants and desires and all those things? And so because when you've had issues like this early on in the marriage, then you have a lot more freedom to talk about them. So this has just always been a part of how we engage each other. We're not afraid to talk about it. We're not afraid in the act of it, during, after, all of it. We do. I like that. Do that faster, slow down, all of that, right?
Yeah,
keep doing that. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
No, I think that's a great thought because it's the communication. It's kind of like when you look at TV and everything, that there's really no communication. It's like everybody has to figure it out. You don't have to communicate what she likes or anything like that.
So good.
And then the discussion afterwards is everything was blissful.
Yeah.
It can be blissful. It can be oh my gosh, it was great. But I think people take away that trust that you talk about, that communication, because it's not, it's like, hey, I'm ready to go. She ready to go, but we're not really communicating. We're thinking our bodies are just supposed to just collide and then boom.
Yes. Yeah.
And one person is not communicating what they want, but they thinking this is how it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And because of maybe your past and everything like that, well, mm-hmm. this is how it's supposed to work. And it's like, well, my body don't work that way. Yes. I need you to slow down, or I need you to do this. I need you to do that, because I'm different from what you thought, all that other type of stuff is. And so communication is huge. I think communication is probably the start of the sexual union,
Yeah, really good. That's really good that you highlighted that.
Yeah, and I think when you first get married, you don't think like that. I know I wasn't thinking communication is a huge key in a healthy sex life. I wasn't thinking like that at all when we first got married.
So let's get to a few details on this communication. We've been talking about communication in general, but what are the types of things that we need to be communicating before, during, and after?
I would say, I think for women, we need to be like emotionally connected. So I think like when we first got married, there were several things we were dealing with, but one of them was I'm working, we had young kids. And then at night he'd be like, hey, and I'd be like, no, I'm tired. And then he would be feeling some kind of way. And I was like, I'm so tired. I'm
tired too.
Yes. I'm tired.
Tired of not getting none.
He was tired of me being tired. And so there's been multiple moments, I would say, throughout our whole marriage where we've had to have really hard talks about sex. And that was definitely one of them, because I was like, if you want me to be in a good spot, like I need you to ask me, a little bit earlier. He was like, I don't want to be the only person asking. And I was like, I need more help around the house. And I think in my mind, it was like the man asked, I don't even need to voice my opinion. Like when you want to do something, you just let me know and we all good. But based on my past, I realized I didn't do well when I was asked. I had an attitude, you know what I mean? So we had to work some things out, especially me. I had to work a lot.
So that goes back to communication. We thinking we're reading each other's mind. Like, oh, I'm ready.
Yeah. And I'm like, and you should know. I took care of two babies and a job. I'm tired. You should know.
Yeah. So we're not communicating. And for me, I don't know how other people, but I'll go ahead and be transparent. And for me, I took it as rejection when she said no. I took it almost personally. Like, what's wrong? What's going on? How come you don't want to have sex? Now we're married. Hey, there's no shame. There's no worrying about other things. And when you say no, it's like, what's going on? We're married. That's what we're married people supposed to do.
And I think too, in Christendom, we turn off the faucet per se, and then we just expect to just turn it right back on and all is well. And for some people, it's not like that. For the men, probably, but I think for the women, sometimes it's a little bit harder, especially when you've gone years without sex. It's like, okay, well, now I can do this, but you know what I mean? So there's a lot of different areas or topics that you need to discuss.
Yeah, we had a stint in our marriage early on. I mean, I will never forget it. I don't remember the length of time we dealt with this, but there was a time where Kendra didn't want to have sex at all, right, for a little while. I don't know. And for me, it felt like a year, but I'm sure it was
definitely not a year, not even close to a year.
Some weeks, maybe something like that. But it was just like, and so as the husband, you're like, what is wrong with me? Is it me? But what's going on? And that's when I think one of the things I learned was about emotional connection. And that's there was a disconnect with us, I think, in terms of just talking and understanding where each other was at that time in our lives, and knowing that, hey, I need to allow her to express herself and who she is in the ways that she wants to, and understand that without just always tapping on her for sex.
So, and it's so that to me, that actually makes me think about what Angie was talking about, being tired. So one of the conversations that we had in our marriage group is, I know that is a common reason that women give for not desiring sex, is because of all the mental load that women carry, as they are the ones who a lot of times are keeping everything running. And so when you're the person that keeps everything going in your household, whether you're the man or the woman, it puts a load on your mind. And so then when it's time to go into the mode of being vulnerable enough to open yourself up sexually to your partner, it can feel like a lot to ask, because it feels like it's one more thing where someone is asking me for something, and somebody is needing something from me, right? And so being tired is really, to me, a lot of times a way of saying, I need help. I really need you to lighten the load here that I'm carrying, and then I will feel more free and more available to you. And I think that this happens a lot when people have smaller children, right? Because they demand on both people, they put a demand on both of you, because emotionally you're constantly giving to them and they're not necessarily giving back to you, right? And so then when it comes time for sex, you have been giving out so much that you really don't necessarily, like, when you think about trying to get to a place where you're ready for it, it feels like a heavy lift, right? And so I think that some of, when again going back to communication, sometimes we should let the other person know what our needs are, or the person can start anticipating what the need is, right? They can start anticipating, like, let me move this off of your plate, let me help you with this, let me be the one to do this. And not because they're expecting to get something from you in the end, but knowing that, hey, it's going to lighten the load of my spouse, and that's going to make life better for all of us. And so I think that's a common reason.
So that's one solution in terms of taking things off the list, because that's where that's where I learned about the list. Right, in our marriage, we learned that Kendra has sex in her list, but it's not at the top like mine is. Right, sex for me during that time, and it changes over time, but sex was like number one. Sex for her was like number 10. Right, I'm just making these up, but it was lower on the list than mine. So hey, maybe me figuring out, and the only way I find out what the list is and then what priority things are is we talk, right? Because it's in her head. So we started talking about these things, and part of the solution is, hey, I can do the dishes. Hey, I can take the kids. And the other solution might be hire a nanny. I don't know, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the one to do the things that lower the mental load, but together you guys need to figure out how to move sex up on her list, and so that you have
or his, depending on whoever,
so that you have a better balanced or an understanding that hey, we can get this done, we can get back to this. And the other thing I wanted to say, and then I'll shut up, is or I'll let somebody else talk and then come back in, is that even as like you said, Angie, as Christians, we shut it off, right, until we get married. And then when we get married, we expect it to come right back on. Sometimes in marriage, it for whatever reason, mental load, illness, trauma, whatever, it can shut off. And just so that those who are now just entering into marriage, or maybe you're not that far along, it will get better, right? It does improve. It does open back up, right? So it's not one of those things where, oh, maybe it's never going to happen. No, if you are communicating with each other, you are figuring out the mental load and all these different learning these different things through community, through reading books, through just going to the Lord, prayer, it'll open back up, right? If you could shut it off until you got married, then hey, having it shut off for a few days, weeks, whatever, until you figure it out, it'll be worth it in the end.
Yeah.
Trust me.
So I have two thoughts. The first thought I was thinking was sex and spontaneity, spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
So that we think that sex should be spontaneous. It should be just, spur of the moment. I'm watching TV and whoa. And sometimes it's like that. And I don't want to paint the picture because some people have had remarkable sex, and then when kids came in, then maybe it was a little more difficult.
Right.
For us, kids already came in with a kid, and then Chris came along 7 months into our marriage, and so now we got 2 kids, and so we're moving to different states and stuff like that. So it was a lot of stuff that was going on, and then we had our own personal stuff that we're trying to become one. We had to deal with that. We were trying to become one, and we're trying to get rid of some of the baggage that we was bringing into our marriage. But I had a question for you guys, because you guys didn't have no kids when you before you got married. So was this when kids started coming, the list had to be thought about, or was this when y'all didn't have no kids? It was that type of.
That's a great question. It was after we had kids, wasn't it?
I think there was always a list. I think it changed. I think it got. I think it increased with the kids. The responsibilities increased, but I think before the kids, there was a list there too. We were having challenges early on, even before we had kids, and I think the list. I think you always had a list, is what I'm trying to say. It shifted and changed in terms of what was on the list as we had kids.
Well, I feel like I see it a little bit differently than Daniel does. I think that one of the things I didn't, it's layers. Like, so we're talking about a list because we're talking about being tired. There's also trauma that a person has experienced, right? And so there's also, what have you been exposed to? So I had been exposed to porn early on when I was younger. Not that family members knew, but I had been exposed to it. I had also had experiences with people that were children, not adults, thank God. And kids, they experiment, they explore, all those things. So I had those experiences. So now when we talk about in Genesis, naked and unashamed, that God wanted them to be naked and unashamed. Being naked with another person, if you haven't seared your conscience, right? Where if you haven't been someone who sex is more transactional to you, but when it actually is an intimate act that you have with another person, now you're entering into a marriage, and there is a vulnerability that comes with marriage where you are exposed in every possible way. You are exposed physically, you are exposed financially, emotionally, spiritually, everything, emotionally, all of it. And so I was exposed. So everything that I had not dealt with or had not faced, when we got married, now sex enters the picture. I'm supposed to be free in the bedroom with you, which is a very intimate, vulnerable place to be, right? So then I start shutting down, and I don't necessarily even know why, right? Because hot and heavy, right? Before we get married, then we get married.
We wanted to be hot and heavy. We weren't.
Right. Well, we was as hot and heavy as you could be with your clothes still on. Right? So then you get married, and now this is how you're supposed to live. And so I think that all of the stuff that was below the surface came to the surface. And so that's why I had challenges early on, and it wasn't like that it was all the time. It was like it would just be, for whatever reason, I would have these moments and I would have a hard time, and I just didn't feel free. Like even in my 20s, I was starting to be self-conscious about my body, right? Because remember, our first year of marriage, I gained like 15 pounds or 20 pounds, something like that. So I started becoming self-conscious about my body, and all that stuff, even though he made me feel like Tyra Banks. but it's like, so it was, to me, Dennis, to answer your question, it was layers to why and when, and it just, over time, it eventually got to the point where he's talking about where there's also, as a wife, I want to be naked and unashamed. And so I almost put pressure on myself. And maybe that's why I started shutting down. Because I'm like, I know that this is something I should want. I should be enjoying this. This should be fun. This should be all that stuff. But it just felt like pressure to me.
So that leads me to
not because of you, but just because of me.
Sure.
Yeah.
That leads me to a question, because I even feel like you mentioned being self-conscious, and I think that carries throughout the marriage, right? Because we change. You get now you're at a point where you get older, and you're not as youthful as you used to be. So now that makes you more self-conscious. And I noticed in our own marriage, like one of the things that I expected when I got married was the nakedness and the unashamedness. Unashamed.
Yeah.
Right. And you still see, like, Kendra would cover up or turn away if she's getting undressed or something like that. And in my mind, I'm like, why are you doing that? Are we married? You know, I should be able to see it all. And why are you getting dressed and undressed and all of that? And it's not, it wasn't like that. Right. And even to this day, there's still like a mental thing where she will do that. Right. And sometimes I'll be like, well, why turn around? Right? why you getting dressed over there or in there? Why you covered up? You know, things like that. So I guess I got a question to the women. It's like, what is that? Or Angie, is that something that is that a similar thing in you?
Yeah, I think there's some women it's probably not an issue. I think it's exactly what Kendra said. When you are engaged and you're in premarital counseling, you're just like, this is not going to be an issue.
Yeah.
And you get married, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is an issue. And so I think some people just kind of, it's not an issue. I think other people cover it up. And they're like, I'm going to be whatever you want me to be because I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to lose you type of situation. And then there's probably me and Kendra who are like, this is a struggle. Because I have the same thing. I still have moments too where he's like, the same thing. Like, what you doing? Like, come on. Like, get the light.
Turn them lights on.
Like, come on. Like, you know, and so to me, it's exactly what she said. It's layers. You know, like I had abuse. I had different things I dealt with in previous relationships that were not healthy. And I think you think you're good. And that naked and unashamed thing is just, it's a hard thing. Because I think with women, it's so mental and emotional for us. Like, I will always say this is a good example. Like when we first got married, my prayer time was so dramatic compared to his, right? Like I had like my Jewish prayer cloth. I needed my anointed oil. I had my journal. I needed a specific pen. I had a specific water bottle. I have my worship music. Like, it was a whole set because to me, it was like, this is me dating Jesus. And it was like so like what me and Jesus did. And then we got married and he was like, why are you doing all that? Like, you don't need all that. But I needed that to just get my head in the mindset of I'm going to worship and I'm going to shut all this down. I'm going to get all this out of here, right? And I'm going to emotionally connect with what I'm doing. So I always use that as an example because he was like, I just start praying in the spirit. Like, I don't need any of that. And so over time, when we pray together now, I done left all that stuff. I don't do all the candles. We might do some worship music. We might pull out my prayer shawls. But it's really us just coming together and now we're praying. But I think sometimes you got to get all that stuff out of your head. You got to work through the day. You got to work through previous experiences. To me, it's a lot that goes on inside of a woman to get like ready kind of sometimes. Not all the time. Because I think me and him, I feel like personally compared to where we started, we have come like because a lot of communication, a lot of talking, a lot of expressing things, a lot of me dealing with healing and different things. I feel like we've come a really, really long way compared to where we were when we first got married.
So let's say good evening.
That's a great question, Sheila.
To Sheila. So good evening to you also. So she says, my question is, your parents share what to expect during the marital relationship. So I'm saying that right? My question is, did your parents share what to expect during the marital relationship? First, I'll answer the first part. No. then,
hold on. Let's see if she get 4 no's. Kendra?
Yes, my parents 100% did. 100%.
No. Angel?
I think me and my mom talked a tiny bit, but I know for sure me and my dad stayed far away from that conversation.
Yeah, my dad was one of the main ones who talked to me about sex, and yeah, my mom did. My mom was a teen mother, so
was it in
she
relation
wanted
to being married?
Yeah, it was in relation to sex. Now,
Okay.
I wouldn't say marriage. I wouldn't necessarily say marriage, but it was. My parents did teach us sex. If you can, to wait until marriage when you're with a person that you want, but just sex in general. Yes, they definitely 100% talk to us about sex.
And so, were you taught what being modest is, or what being modest is supposed to be?
No, I feel like I remember. So when we were in Phoenix, we had a small group that focused on sex. Y'all remember that season we did sex, right? Mm-hmm. I remember we had a time in our small group. We literally was like, by a show of hands. And at that time we had a packed small group, which was probably not the definition of a small group. It was a really big group of people. And we were like, how many of you like felt prepared when you got married for sex? Like where you are now? And they're like, no. Okay. How many of you felt like you actually had conversations with your parents about sex, like in-depth questions? And it was like, no. Mm-hmm. Like, where did y'all learn about sex? And everybody was TV, music, entertainment, and friends. You know what I mean? It's like the in-depth stuff where you talk about stuff. So I think majority of us, because I was really surprised in that meeting how many people were like, no, I didn't conversate about it. I didn't know about it. And I learned from my friends or TV or movies, like we said at the beginning. So I think it's a learning process for a lot of people.
I'm being silly, but I was left to the wolves. I'm literally, I don't know how I didn't have a whole bunch of kids, a teenager, because I was just left to my own devices, you know. And, I think my maturity level is that I wanted to go to college. I didn't want to be a statistic. Back then, statistic was having, kids at an early age. And so I knew I didn't want that, but I didn't have no monitoring. I didn't have no curfew. I can come in when I wanted to come in. So I was left to my own devices. Now, when I got to college and I had that same type of mentality, but I had my own place, or I had my own dorm room. So then everything changed from that standpoint because of access. But when I was a teenager, I think my stepdad tried to talk to me about some biological stuff with sex. And it was so weird that it comes out the blue. It's like I was watching cartoons and then he's like, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And I'm like, okay. Back to Transformers. You know what I mean? We'll catch the football or something. I was like, it was weird. So I didn't really connect the two. So, and that was it. I didn't really, my mom never talked to me, about sex, or if it was something, you better not do this, you better not do that. But it was never a sit down, communicating one-on-one, what you feel about it emotionally, none of that. None of that.
Yeah, my parents did. Yeah, my parents definitely talked to us about sex and in detail, to the point where I'm like, I don't want to hear this. No, thank you. Because when you're a teenager, you're kind of embarrassed to talk about sex with your parents, right? And but my parents definitely talked to us about sex, about being modest. I would say, I don't know necessarily, like, I wasn't raised churched in the sense, like, I went to church every once in a while with grandparents. That was it. Like, as a family, that was not how we lived as a family. We feared God, but we were not church people, and that just wasn't a part of my upbringing at all. And so modesty was not a conversation that I remember in the churchy sense. Okay. So in the modest, in the sense of, don't walk out of here with your booty cheeks hanging out, because I was raised in the 90s, And so that was back when Daisy Dukes were a thing. So I used to wear my Daisy Dukes. I used to wear my little short Daisy Duke shorts. But the cheeks.
Sorry.
You know what song just hit out.
Exactly. That's exactly the song. And the cheeks weren't hanging out, but they were definitely short. I definitely was wearing the little short shorts and stuff like that. And even like the music that I listened to and so I would say I was a modest person. I am a modest, I was more of a modest person until you start having children and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, child, get in here and do what y'all got to do. I'm good. But yeah, so
what
I'm talking about, like, I still remember when I was having Naya, our first child.
What?
And I remember, I just wanted to be me and Daniel in the delivery room. I remember I had the attitude. When I got into the heavy labor, I'm like, the president of the United States can walk up in here right now and I don't care.
Yeah.
Get this baby out now. So all that modesty went out the window when I started having kids in that sense.
Well, so yeah, I think in a hospital delivering baby type situation, you don't care.
All bets are off.
Booty cheeks hanging out, that's cool. But I'll say from a male perspective, I was taught modesty, right, growing up, because we were raised in a very strict Christian environment, where to the point where women only wear dresses, and men didn't wear shorts or short sleeves, right? So I remember running track in jeans and long sleeve shirts, in the summer, right? So that's how strict it was in terms of what you could show and couldn't show, not just for the women, but also for the men, right? So
wow, because they believed that to show skin was immodest. Is that why?
It was sinful
to show your skin,
to show certain parts of your body. That was considered sin.
Interesting. Well, Sheila is saying, so just so you guys know, Sheila is a mentor to me, and she's in ministry. She's a retired teacher, and she's saying that her husband's mother taught him everything about marital relations. She was not taught because it was almost like it was nasty. Yeah. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people, especially people of faith, right?
Yeah, I was gonna mention her comment too, because I thought that was something that was really good, because I think in both worlds, right? So in church, I think across the board, church is very much like, stay away from it. We weren't really taught like, this is God's covenant. It's a celebration of his covenant, right? Like, it is something he created. Like, it's okay. We were just taught, stay away from it, it's sin. But then I think in the world's way, it's kind of like men could kind of go out there and just, they were celebrated. But then women, it was like, don't go out there and be a hoe. You know what I'm saying? Yep. So I think from both arenas, you were like, I need to not do this. I need to not do that. Or people are going to talk about me, or people are going to whatever. So I think for women, it's just a little different ball game. Because I remember somebody I mentored years ago. She had got pregnant before she got married, and she just was dealing with so much shame. And I was like, I understand, because I went through the same thing when I got pregnant before we got married. But it's kind of like, I remember the difference of me getting pregnant at 20 versus when me and him got married and I got pregnant. When I first got pregnant, it was like, oh my gosh, your life is falling apart. With him, it was such a huge celebration. And so just to kind of get the contrast, I just think that's kind of what women deal with too. You know what I mean?
And I will say it was if a man had sex with multiple women, it was kind of like,
right.
And so like I said, I didn't have no boundaries. And so a lot of guys I heard or who I hung out with, it was that push to do it. And I don't think it was like, kind of gang related type of push, like, man, you better get out there and do something. It was more of, this is what we do. You date a girl. Did you have sex? And if you didn't have sex, you almost felt like
you was a punk.
Yeah, you was a punk. You're not a man or anything like that. And so you found yourself subtly trying to kind of move in that direction and figure things out. Even though you didn't, because you didn't have no parents to kind of teach you. Well, no, you don't do that. You don't say that. You don't. No, you need to. And I didn't have that. So everything from high school, college, it was all a whole learning experience for me. From the ups and downs. And so by the time I came out of college and I'm going going into church, I'm looking at everybody else like, man, they had never done anything. I mean, it's like everybody's lived this perfect, life, and I'm like, wow, I'm horrible.
And think how much that affects us in marriage, because like the women are dealing with this, the men over here are dealing with this. Like you can be with multiple women and go have a ball and you're great, and how much it affects us. And then of course, most of us aren't really taught communication either. You know what I mean? I would say pretty much every couple we meet, it's about communication, and people really struggle with communication. So how much more would you struggle with communication when it comes to a very intimate area like sex? And I liked what Sheila said too, because it is something beautiful and celebrated. But I remember I was at a church service years ago in Detroit, and we had a special speaker. And this is when we were at Word of Faith. Word of Faith was huge. Like our sanctuary, I think, was like 5,000 people or something like that. And I remember her asking, how many of you in this room, your parents taught you that sex was a beautiful thing, and you grew up just knowing that sex was a beautiful thing? And I think it was like 2 people. It was like nobody raised their hand. Wow. And so I think
it's like, why is that? Is it that we're afraid that if we tell our children how beautiful it is, that they're gonna want to have sex? Like, why is that not being, or maybe because people have had such bad sexual experiences themselves that they don't see it as beautiful, right?
Well, we say this because I was a youth leader for many years, and I noticed we taught the extreme always to the youth because we didn't want them, especially where we grew up. You didn't want them having
a baby daddy
and having kids early because seeing as beautiful, it's like, well, you get some young people who don't have the filter. They don't have what's it?
Your frontal lobe.
Yeah, the frontal lobe is not developed. So let's experience beautiful things. So you were taught the extreme of not only the weight, which is good, but you're also taught about this could happen. And so it's more fear-based. And so that's when you got a lot of fear. And then you do step out or you do cross the line. Now that shame there is humongous. And then don't let a young lady get pregnant, at 15, 16 years old. She's considered, especially in the faith community, a lot of times, people will say, don't judge.
Right. A prodigal. Yeah.
We judge. And it's unfortunate. But I remember how TD Jakes, how he treated his daughter when she fell and how she turned around. But I can remember she said a lot of times it was hard. That season was very hard. And so I didn't know what it was like in the faith community because, well, let me say this real quick now. I'll be quiet. I did go to a Catholic school. And I do remember my first year at that Catholic school, one of the girls wound up getting pregnant, and she wound up getting kicked out of school because I went to Catholic school. So they didn't believe in that. Then you can't be pregnant walking around the school. And so thinking about, man, when I was thinking about that, it's like, man, she got kicked out of school not because of grades, not because of bad behavior,
right?
But because of that. Now, schools they wouldn't do nothing like that, but this Catholic school did it, and I remember that was my first year there. I never saw her again, and it was just really crazy to think about how. And I'm not trying to put us Christians in this judgment, but I can see how the faith community, the Christian faith, can be hard at times on that and be extreme
And I think when you have a topic, you don't really know what to say or do because you don't want people to either go through what you went through or you're afraid of what could happen or whatever. I think people do go to the extremes sometimes. And I think when you don't, I think I have to ask my mom. I don't know my dad because he's with Jesus now, but I need to ask my mom, like, was it, I'm sure, because it's a hard conversation. Like, even with our kids, it's a hard conversation, but I'm like, look, I'd rather have you hear from me than somebody else. Right. So we have had conversations, but even having this conversation, I'm like, we could have way more, you know what I mean? But we definitely have had, I would say, a lot of conversations with them about it. But I think it's just maybe just not knowing what to do. And sex is such for some people it's embarrassing, for other people it's a sensitive topic, for other people it comes with trauma and bad thoughts. So I think the enemy has done a lot, especially when your sexuality, especially if you look where we're at now, where your sexuality is attached to your identity. I think he's a really good job of just jacking that up. You know what I mean? Just kind of just messing it up, right?
Especially the way the Western world thinks about sex. I mean, you can probably go to other cultures and they're not bothered by the conversation of it. But when we talk about it, it's so many different variations. And then it got to fit into the cultural box, you know, and then in that cultural box, it got to be this way, it got to be that way. And everybody's like, yep, you got to be that way. No, it don't. It don't have to be that way.
Yeah, it's so how do we change the conversation?
Yeah, like what would you want?
Because the conversation now, I can remember, you know, when I was young and even now, the conversation is really about not doing it, right? And that's all we know to teach and all we know to say, and unless we seek out different ways of integrating that conversation into our families, right? How do we talk about the beautiful aspects of it without encouraging? Without feeling like we're encouraging our kids to go do it, right? And I think that's been the issue.
Well, you know what? I think we do want our kids to have sex. We want them to wait until they're in a marriage, right? And I think that, like, to me, sex is a natural biological part of being a human being or walking around on this earth, right? And I think that we always put some type of not taboo, but we put so many restrictions around it. And even in how we talk about it as married couples. Like, I remember when we decided to have a semester where we talked about sex in our marriage groups, there was a couple, an older married couple, that stopped coming to the groups because we used the word sex.
And there's nothing we can do about that.
Right. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do about that. But so, like, I'm like, I think that so much of it is more about just letting people, let them understand, letting our, like, when we work with couples and when we talking to our children, trying to let them know, okay, this is the biological aspects of it. This is your body. And then this is, you know, knowing all your body parts is important and knowing what they do. And, you know, the man should know his wife's body. Like, okay, this is what's happening in her body. She should know what his body, like being able to look at his body parts and all that kind of stuff. And then, so, like, that's the biological piece of it. Then what is the purpose of sex? Like, what is the reason that God has decided to use sex in this earth? One of the ways that one of the things he said to Adam and Eve was be fruitful and multiply, right? So sex is God's idea. God designed sex. He designed all the pleasure that you feel when you have sex. That was God's idea. He didn't, it wasn't like in some back room that he was hiding it from you. He, like, literally put it in your body that this is what it's for. And so what is his design for? What is his purpose for it? Yeah.
Here's a question. So, do you feel that when you're teaching your kids about sex, that the boy should be taught about the anatomy of the boy, or the man and the anatomy of the female, of the woman.
I do.
Do you think they should? Okay. So when you're doing that, right? So let's say your kid is at the age where they can understand what you're teaching them, and now you're showing them a picture of a woman's body. Right. And I think in our minds as Christians, that's a hard one to get around, because we've been taught that, like Sheila said,
it's nasty,
it's
dirty,
and you should flee fornication. But when you're showing a woman's body as a Christian, then you're like, am I presenting like a pornographic type image?
Right. Just showing a naked a woman's body.
Naked woman's body
is not pornographic, right? Because if you've ever looked at porn, so like this is what's interesting. So
and that's the thing. Define pornographic, right?
Right. So let me say this. So
why are you smiling?
So I am. So like this is what's interesting. So I'm reading this book right now, and it's not a Christian book, and it's specifically about women taking more ownership of having pleasure during sex. I feel like our sex life changed for the better when I started to embrace that this was God's idea and I should be having just as much fun with it as he is, right? And this is like, I didn't just get this revelation. I've had this revelation for a long time. But I'm currently reading a book that is excellent, and one of the things that's so interesting, this woman is a doctor, and she talks about how, and this is not a Christian, this is a woman just in the world who is a doctor. She's talking about the fact that a lot of what we think, what we have learned about sex comes from what we've watched on TV, what we've watched in porn, that's not even realistic. Even how people's body parts look, they are digitized. So like certain parts of the woman's body look different. Certain parts of the man's body look different in these pornographic videos or whatever magazines that people, right? It's not even, that's not even real. Like what you're looking at is not even real. So to me, when you have children, like the question you asked was what makes it pornographic? I think what makes it pornographic is when the only purpose of it is to create a fantasy that is not nowhere near what reality actually is. Well, I guess it is somewhat near reality, but like showing a child a picture when you are teaching them about their bodies and you're teaching them about the bodies of the opposite sex, that's not pornographic. I think it becomes pornographic.
I think some Christians would disagree with you.
Yeah.
I do think some people would disagree with it. I think like for those who don't feel comfortable with that, then you are just saying, like the chest area of a woman or whatever. And as they get older, then you have to explain it a little bit deeper. But I think honestly,
it has to be age appropriate too. Yeah. Like you wouldn't show
you
that.
Can draw a cartoon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But even that, it's like, again, in the church, you've always been taught if there's a picture without clothes on, stay away from it. Right? I don't care if it's a cartoon or a scientific picture or whatever it is. It was just like flee away from it.
Yeah.
Don't even take your mind there. And so you're left with don't look at it. Don't do it until you're married. And then the only thing you can look at is your wife. So if people
that's an excellent point.
Had their way from a Christian perspective, I believe the only naked thing you would ever see would be your wife. And you don't even know how to deal with that because you've never been taught, how to. So
and unless you're willing to go and educate yourself, I feel like that's part of what we had to do is we had to, so don't get me wrong. It's like, I got an education about sex. I knew what sex was. But y'all laughing, but seriously, I've heard multiple people on social media saying when they got married, there is one couple in particular, they have a very popular podcast. She was raised in a Christian home. She said that she didn't even know that the penis goes in the vagina. Like she didn't even know that on her wedding day. This is a grown woman. And so she didn't even have that understanding. She's going into marriage that ignorant about her own body and about the body of this person that she's about to spend the rest of her life with.
I would say I have been to bridal showers that were Christian bridal showers, and we went around the room to give wisdom. And I was like, girl, you may want some Tylenol. And everybody was like, shh, don't be telling her that. And I'm like, I'm just trying to help out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like in church world, we can't even, I will not say we can't. I think that's changing. I think even with like mental health, I think before it was like, let's not talk about it. We're talking about it more. I think it is something that this is probably definitely needs a part 2, because I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface.
Right, I do. Maybe let's part just make it a part 2, so that we can pick up from kind of like here, because this is like, because I know I feel like we talked a lot about the problem, right, that we see and experience, like, and now, okay, like, how do we support couples? Because having fun, having a healthy, vibrant, active sex life is part of what makes marriage fun and enjoyable, right? And so I think it's a very important topic. So Dennis, I'm gonna let you say something, and then I'm gonna ask a question to the audience, and then we'll kind of start to.
And I want to end with one of my favorite scriptures.
Okay. Dennis, what were you going to say? Because I feel like you've been waiting to say something.
The thought that we was talking about, communication. I think married couples, especially if they don't have kids, they should be having talks about sex.
Definitely.
They should be communicating to not only what each other likes, but even if they're looking to having a family, how would we discuss
this with our kids? We're in agreement. Yeah.
And there's an old phrase we used to say back in the day, and y'all know it: being led. And I'm saying really actually being led by the Holy Spirit, because once you start to know your kids, you're praying for your kids, you start to know things about them, like, they can't, this child right here, you can't talk to them a particular way.
Or you may be like, this child, we can't show no pictures to this child.
Yeah. So being led means, seeking, praying, going before the Lord, and letting the Lord lead and guide you. I think sometimes we sit in the church, and thank God for when the church talks about it, and we were talking about it in the church. But sometimes as individual families,
maybe we're waiting too much for the church.
We're waiting to hear what the pastor has saying, but God is saying stuff right there in the scriptures.
That's right.
It's not meant to, we gotta stop and come back again. Oh, stop. It's meant to go all the way. It's meant to go all the way for a purpose. And so I think we need to be discussing more things more often than what we think. And I just think we get so busy with other things, we get so busy with this and that, and we don't want to talk about it.
And I think it's uncomfortable. I mean, if you look at communication in general, folks don't like talking about it because it's uncomfortable. Conflict is not the most comfortable thing. Hard conversations are not comfortable, but these are the crucial conversations that are needed to make marriage work.
Amen. Amen.
All right.
I love that. And I think that I would like, when we meet the next time, my husband about to read his verse. When we meet the next time, I think it is important for us to talk about, even like, what have we taught our kids about sex? I think we should ask our kids, to give us a little report card between now and the next time we meet, of how good of a job they felt like we did and what they wish they had known, and we can talk about that when we meet the next time.
Yeah, and I would love us to push this conversation on into the evolution of the marriage. A lot of this, what we talked about tonight, was like what we learned when we first got into it and all of that. Now, as we've moved on, how has it evolved?
Yes, because it has gotten tremendously better. Hallelujah.
So the verse I wanted to read is Proverbs 5, 14 through 19, or verses. It says, or 15, drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares, let them be yours alone, never be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breast
I knew it had to do with that first.
satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated.
We've been around a Tillman's. No, that scripture was gonna come out.
You see, Beyonce don't have the trademark on being drunk with love. It's right here, baby.
That's right. Intoxicated with her love. Come on. She got that from the Bible.
Yeah.
It's in Proverbs.
Proverbs 5:15-19.
That's good. That's good.
Yes. All right. So that's good. So on that note, that's good. We're gonna pick this conversation back up next week. We're gonna give y'all the report card we got from our kids about how good of a job we did. And then we're also going to continue to talk about what changed, what shifted that helped us be better able to have these kinds of conversations with each other to improve. So
exactly, because we're 27 in, y'all 22 in. So we got a whole lot of ground that we can share in terms of, or wisdom we can share in terms of how it morphs and changes.
Oh, China, come on now, write it down, China. Say it again, Dan. Proverbs 5, verse what?
15-19.
That's right. That's the BIBLE. Yeah. that ain't Beyonce. That ain't none of these other folks people be listening to. That's Jesus.
Right.
Wisdom.
Right. Wisdom. I wonder what the Message Bible says on that one.
That's just the iceberg. Y'all want some real juicy stuff? Jump in the Song of Solomon.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I was actually expecting you to talk about that tonight. So we'll try to give y'all a little taste of Song of Solomon too when we meet the next time. That's like one of our Daniel's favorite things to talk about when we talk about sex.
Yeah, I'm taking my son through that right now.
Our 16-year-old, he taking him through the Song of Solomon right now. So so he'll know how to talk sweet to his wife when he get married.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, as Dennis would say.
He'd be like, oh no, it's like I read when I get to breast, I emphasize breast.
It's really good in the message, y'all. I know I don't have time to read it all, but it's really good.
Next week.
Well, no, we can end on you reading it, Angie.
Okay.
So before you read it though, we want to encourage you whenever you watch this to join us at our December marriage event, December the 14th, our Winter Wonderland. I promise y'all,
it's gonna be
I'm telling if you need to be there. We have so much amazingness planned for y'all, and I can't even fully express how good it's gonna be.
Like,
but you want to be there.
Sat in meetings, and me and Kendra literally are like ourselves. Describe to us that we are going to be doing. So don't miss out, y'all. Don't miss out. I'll be talking about it. Dang, I should have went because you're gonna hear it from other people.
Right, and the link is on the bottom of the screen. It's scrolling across. All right, so Angie, you're gonna take us out with this.
All right,
Message Bible.
I'm gonna try to be fast with it too. It says, "Do you know the saying, drink from your own rain barrel, draw water from your own spring-fed well? It's true. Otherwise, you may one day come home and find your barrel empty and your well polluted." Your spring water is for you and you only, not to be passed around among strangers. Bless your fresh flowing fountain. Enjoy the wife you married as a young man, lovely as an angel, beautiful as a rose. Don't ever quit taking delight in her body. Never take her for granted. Why would you trade enduring intimacies for cheap thrills with a prostitute, for dalliance with a promiscuous stranger?
Come on now.
Message Bible be like, pat, 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 pat. Pity pat.
All right. I'm putting that verse right here.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila. We're gonna have so much fun.
Sheila bought her tickets. Y'all better get y'all's.
All right, y'all. Until next week. Peace.
And hair grease.
Oh, yeah.
And hair grease. Bye, y'all.